Welcome to the wonderful world of books, one of Seven Worlds and Seven World Productions, a subsidiary of Angelgrm Music. My name is Gino, and I am sole owner of Angelgrm Music and executive director of Seven World Productions. Continuing our series in Search of Beauty, we have the next chapter, which is Chapter 11, Brenda. Hope you enjoy. Previously on In Search of Beauty. At the tender age of 25, I moved away from Michigan to new adventures in Texas. I had spent 5 years from the death of my father in honing my craft and improving my competency in musicianship. Thanks to Mr. Meeker, I felt like an adult embarking on my life's work, and I looked forward to new experiences in Texas, my new home and workplace. I was brimming with excitement and anticipation for what lay ahead. Chapter 11, Brenda. Someone once said, "Into each life some rain must fall," and my life was no exception. Moving from one part of our country to another can be very daunting and exciting. Charlie's place at the Sheraton Hotel downtown Fort Worth, Texas was waiting, and I was eager to get going. This hotel had been known as the Texas Hotel in 1963. It was the place President John F. Kennedy spent his last night before boarding Air Force One in Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth and fly to Love Field in Dallas on that fateful day, November 21st, 1963. The trip in the U-Haul to Fort Worth, Texas started in Flint, Michigan, with stops in Cleveland to pick up belongings and luggage for Jim Gertner and Cindy Ratzloff, who played harp at Cedar Point. They were flying down to Texas and had helped pay for the truck. Pete Broadhead, who had played piano with me at Cedar Point, joined in the U-Haul truck with his belongings and luggage to help with the driving. He was only 17, but was a good friend, and I trusted his driving. In addition to all of our belongings, we had to load up Cindy's harp that was stored in a box crate for transportation. As soon as the harp was strapped in, Cindy made us promise to drive carefully to Fort Worth. I told her we had to stop to make in Webster, Missouri, to pick up Jeannie Perky, one of the singers in the American Sings show from that summer, and pick up her belongings and luggage. Jeannie also joined us with her car. After an overnight stay at her place, we caravanned out of St. Louis with Pete driving the U-Haul and I driving Jeannie's car behind it. We were headed for Texas south on I-45 towards Joplin. As we crossed the Missouri-Oklahoma line, we encountered a violent thundershower and visibility became very low. We slowed down, and as we did, Jeannie's car had the back right tire blow out. I pulled over to the shoulder of the interstate with the rain pounding on us like a runaway fire hydrant. We were pelted by the rain so hard I could not get out right away to change the tire. Jeannie and I watched helplessly as Pete disappeared in front of us with the U-Haul in the pouring rain. In the fall of 1973, there were no cell phones to call and warn Pete in the U-Haul of our predicament. After about 30 minutes, the rain let up a little, and I jumped out and had to remove half of the contents of the trunk to get to the spare. All of Jeannie's stuff was getting wet. I tried to work fast, but was unable to budge the lug nuts. Hard as I tried, I kept failing in getting them loosened. I replaced all of her belongings into the trunk and got back into the car as the rain reignited its punishing fervor and came down in buckets. Over an hour went by, and Jeannie and I began to wonder what happened to Pete and the U-Haul. I made one more attempt to get out of the vehicle, and with the rain still coming down, and tried again to get the lug nuts turning. No such luck. I began to wonder what I had gotten myself into. This was not the plan of exciting new adventures. This was turning into a nightmare. Finally, a pickup truck slowed down and pulled over to the shoulder in front of us, and a huge man stepped out of it and came up to me and asked, "Need some help?" I replied, "I can't seem to get the lug nuts moving to replace this flat." He said, "Let me give it a whack." He picked up the tool and proceeded to yank on the lug nuts, and with one plop was able to free them loose. We had the tire changed in 5 minutes. In my mind, he was a godsend, and I thanked him profusely. He just smiled and said, "Have a safe trip," as he got in his pickup and left. We were now over 2 hours behind Pete, so I floored the gas pedal in an attempt to catch up with him. We drove nearly an hour with no sign of Pete and the U-Haul. The car's fuel indicator was way past empty, so we exited for gas. We filled the car with gas, used the restroom facilities, and bought a quick snack to continue and hurry to catch Pete. Just as we were about to pull out of the service station, in drove a U-Haul honking its horn like crazy. Pete had found us. After telling each other aside to the event, we discovered that after about an hour of driving in the rain, Pete glanced back in his side view mirror and noticed we were not there. He took the very next exit and had to fill up the U-Haul. He made a U-turn back on the interstate to get back and try to find us. Mind you, it was still raining hard, so visibility was poor. He got all the way back to Joplin and had not seen us anywhere. He was getting nervous about what might have become of us, but knew that he last saw us at the border. So he turned around and headed west again into Oklahoma. In the meantime, our Angel had stopped with his pickup and made the repairs. We took off, not realizing that Pete was behind us, not in front. Pete just kept on going and hoping we would stop somewhere. He finally got tired and needed to make a quick pit stop to visit the men's room. He happened to stop where we had, and by sheer luck, we were reunited just as the storm had subsided. We had passed our first test, and we knew that we were going to be all right after that. The good Lord kept watch over us and brought us together where we belonged. We arrived at the Fleetwood Apartments in the Handley subdivision of East Fort Worth without any further incidents. An interesting side note regarding that area is that the Harvey Oswald was buried just a couple of miles from those apartments. Mr. Meeker had made arrangements with the landlord of these apartments, and all of us signed a one-year contract to stay. I shared a two-bedroom apartment with Jim Gertner, who was assigned as the manager of Charlie's Place. I was assigned the duties of musical director. After unloading all our belongings and luggage at the apartments, Pete and I drove the U-Haul to the basement of the Sheraton Hotel in downtown Fort Worth, where Charlie's Place was located. We delivered Cindy's harp undamaged, much to her relief. To show you the kind of man Mr. Meeker was, he invited and paid for all of our parents' flight and accommodations for opening night at Charlie's Place. By the fees received from the Dr. Pepper Bottlers Convention, all of us performed in at the Fairmont Hotel in Dallas that year. He wanted to show his appreciation to our parents for trusting their kids to his tutorship. Some of us had come from over 1,500 miles to relocate. In those days, parents wanted to know that their kids were not being taken advantage of. Every parent was proud of our work and how professional the entire package of entertainment was. Charlie's Place had gourmet food with stylish waiters and waitresses, and our show was 90 minutes of non-stop musical review with singing and dancing just like the supper clubs of the 1940s. We even performed an extra show to say goodnight to all the patrons that stayed for cocktails. And on a rotation basis, all the piano players played cocktail music between the performances of the cast. We rehearsed for 7 days with some of us from Cedar Point and a few others from Six Flags Over Texas and Georgia. It was at these rehearsals that I met Jay Johnson and his wife Sandy. Jay had worked for Mr. Meeker at both Six Flags Parks and Desert Fiesta, while Sandy, his wife, had worked at Astro World Amusement Park in Houston as a dancer. Jay was and still is to this day an extraordinary ventriloquist. His figure, Squeaky, performed at Charlie's Place to rave reviews. Jay and Sandy left Charlie's Place in 1974 and moved to Hollywood for a career in TV. Sandy got a part in an LA production of Chorus Line. I have another chapter devoted to their career in later years that led Jay to Broadway and a Tony Award-winning show. We continued as best as we could at Charlie's Place without Jay and Sandy, always hoping that our chance at stardom would happen soon too. We performed 6 nights a week with Monday as our dark night. After the first year, I moved out of the Fleetwood apartments because Jim wanted Cindy, the harp player, to move in with him. They eventually married, but that's another chapter, and I promised to fill the reader in later. I moved across the street from the Fleetwood and had purchased some furniture of my own. In addition, my mother shipped the Hardman grand piano I had learned to play on since 5th grade. I kept that piano for a few more years, then sold it to Whittle Music Company in Dallas, Texas, a company I later worked for. But you guessed it, that's another chapter. Just about every night after work, I would go for drinks at a bar within walking distance of the apartment I was living in called Charlie Brown's. That's where I met Brenda McDuff. She was the bartender. Brenda was about 5'7", tall, a little on the hefty side, with dark hair and dark eyes, a typical Fort Worth, Texas-born female. She had an infectious smile and a twinkle in her eyes that I grew fond of after a few vodka tonics, my favorite drink at that time in my life. I would help her close the place at 2 a.m., and then we would go to breakfast at Denny's after that. I would not get home till around 3 or 3:30 a.m. and get up at noon the next day. Brenda and I had what you would call a platonic relationship. She was a few years older than me and had lots of male friends, and I was just one of them. I knew that she was seeing other guys, and I was content with just being friends. Brenda was a fan of the kids, as we were affectionately called. She even celebrated her birthday at Charlie's Place, and I picked up her tab that night. I mention her in this memoir because Brenda was instrumental in helping me purchase my first automobile in Texas. One of her friends was Ted Arundale, who owned a Ford dealership in Arlington, Texas. Brenda put in a good word for me to Ted himself, and Mr. Meeker advanced me $500 as a down payment on a brand new Mustang. And so in the fall of 1974, I bought my first car in Texas with $90 monthly payments that included insurance financed through Arlington Bank and Trust. I felt I was truly a bona fide adult at the age of 26. Mr. Meeker gave all of us a 2-week paid vacation on January 1975. I drove my brand new Mustang to Los Angeles to visit and stay with Jay and Sandy. I had written some original songs, and I was going to peddle them to a few music publishers and hope to get signed. I was determined to make a name for myself. I had a great time in L.A. with Jay and Sandy, but alas, no contract offers came from all those meetings. I went back to Texas a little disappointed, but was determined to try again. I worked hard at improving my skills as a piano player and songwriter in the next year at Charlie's Place. Then, in the spring of 1976, another defining moment came when at the end of one evening's performance, we received word that Mr. Meeker had suffered a heart attack in Houston, Texas, where he had gone for a speaking engagement. He died, and it seemed that all of our dreams would die with him. I had lost a second mentor, and I began to feel as if I was jinxed in this life. Every man that I looked up to had died suddenly and left me like a boat without a sail or rudder. I felt lost. But life has a way of making up for losses like that, and I would soon learn that lesson. If you liked this episode, click like and add your comments. Better still, why don't you subscribe if you haven't already so that you may receive email notifications of future episodes. Also, check out our other worlds at Seven World Productions: the world of art, the world of faith, the world of family, the world of food, the world of games, and the world of music. Go and be inspired.